Hey, and welcome back. Let's talk about dots connecting, and I'm not talking about massive hailstones slamming into solar panels, making a dot formation that we can connect. I'm sure we can find animals in there, just like you can see animals in the sky and the clouds. But all the events across the world seem to connect into a wider picture. Something is happening in this reset fashion. Natural variability overrides human input. We cannot stop these storm systems in our skies, dropping record hail, record rains across our crop zones. Modern infrastructure can't cope, as we can already see. Huge amount of cracks across Brazil. We got landslides happening across Asia, and now we have massive hailstones in the north hemisphere just pummeling country after country. If it's not the snowfall and the hail in the deserts of Saudi Arabia, it's this kind of grapefruit size that's ripping to shreds everything we thought would be the golden utopian cash cow moving us over into this renewable world. Not going to stand up. More fragile than our 1800s ecosystem of technology. Speaking of which, California here, people are outraged that they moved to stop signs away from stop lights because the theft of copper. Now, if we're looking at this already at the very beginnings of our infrastructure will be stripped for those who are pinched against a wall and have to choose to feed their families. The copper wiring out of those devices there, those stop lights and poles, hundreds of dollars worth at today's price. What happens if everything triples 10 times, 20, 50 times? Everything that we know in our infrastructure will be at risk of theft. Dismantling. So town residents are angry. Well, maybe you should do something about the imbalance in inflation rate and cost of living. This wouldn't happen otherwise. Remember 2008 and 9, the great financial crisis. This happened also. People were stripping generators just for the copper, a few $100s for the copper, but they'd render a $1 million generator inoperable. No thinking clearly on this. The target is the metal I could steal and then go sell somewhere in the eyes of those who do such things. It's not about, hey, that's $1 million device that I would ruin. No. We're coming back to base instincts again here. So let's talk about copper for a second because it is the base metal of all industry. Everything, look around your house, for example, what has copper in it? Everything. This is the base metal that runs our world. Not talking precious metals, but if this is going to spike up, then everything else is going to spike as well with it. It's like the base food commodities. If your wheat goes up, if your corn goes up, all your other prices of everything else go up because that's the base of it. Let's look. Copper prices hitting all-time high. Copper's the new oil. The story of the boom. I'll give it a boom. Here we go. Copper futures straight up. Record prices above $5. Yeah, that beats the 2008 and 9 financial crisis prices. So where does it go from here? Now, if you're looking at these charts, the run-up started somewhere around April, and it just continues. Now, what was that trigger for April? Because I'm going to come back to a few different charts here as we go through today. We see that there was some event that suddenly everything rolled over into record pricing, from different foodstuffs to metals and everything in between. So what happens next? Copper surging to record high in New York. Sudden price spike. What caused that? Is it the awareness or the instant devaluation of our currency? David Brady warns the S&P could nosedive to 1,000 points, erasing 14 years of gains. CEOs like Jamie Dimon have been warning about 70s era stagflation. The 70s were a lost decade for the stock market, but gold and silver exploded higher. From 1972 to 1974, gold gained 240% and silver surged 315%. Call the proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Also, Patriot Gold Group has a no-fee-for-life IRA where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver. No fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 546-7020. And now on with the video. Because if you look at coming on every 100 days now, they're going to be printing $1 trillion of U.S. debt to issue to the rest of the world to keep our system going. And now that's just to cover the interest payments, which is going to be more than the expenditure on the military. Puts us right in the corner with Rome again. And different nation, British Empire. Too much spending on foreign intervention. Eventually can't afford that military and everything contracts. Well, we're right at the cusp of that. Going to have to bring in and reduce the size of military bases or the number of them unless a gigantic war starts, and then there could be more money printing. So COMEX showing us. Now, if we go out and do a little bit longer term forecast, deficits, nothing is above the zero mark here. These are all minus, below zero forecasts. So 434, what's that, 1,000 tons will be the deficit, 23-24, and then we move into over 500,000 tons for 2024. Next year, also 500,000 tons, 2026. And then we look at getting into the millions of tons. So 1,000 thousands is a million. So we're looking at 1.8 million ton deficit in 2028. So if our economy is already crumbling because we don't have the base metals and they're running away in price, what does this show you here? More contraction, more contraction. Everything's going to get more expensive. These producers of this, the miners of this, every one of their input costs is going up as well. And then to throw a little weirdness into it, why is China buying so much copper, do you think? That's that dark blue line there. Any reason they would buy so much copper in advance of knowing something that the rest of the world doesn't? Or are they going to use it as a base of part of their Brics aligned currency, the unit? I don't know if anybody's heard about that. The unit is going to be the unit for accounting between Brics nations. And so far they've pegged at 1 gram of gold will equal 1 barrel of oil. Remember, there's 28 grams in an ounce. It depends if you're going to go standard ounce, troy ounce. There's a little bit of variance in that one. But 28 barrels of oil for an ounce of gold approximately put us on par around $70. But if that continues upward and gold price continues up to say 8,000 or so, then what happens with the price of oil? What's happening with copper? Why are they importing so much? They must know something, either a complete breakdown in supply and whoever has what they have is what they have. Would you not do the same? You would just squirrel away as much as you could get in the country if you knew there was going to be a breakdown eventually or soon. Doesn't make sense unless they know something. Now another look at some of these charts here. All of the metals are doing the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's precious metals, silver, gold, copper, nickel. These are all the base metals that make our world go round, especially silver into the new green economy. So when everything's going up at this price, there's nothing that will come down in price. And now we're already hitting with the inflation, and this is what it looks like. This is going to add on top of it. It's going to be the next layer of the cake. Will it be chocolate, vanilla, strawberry? I don't know. But it's the next layer. Also, metals impacted by new technologies. So as we move forward with the green agenda, green whatever you want to call it, new emerging economy, we need these contact materials, tin, silver, and gold, and nickel for batteries, and copper, of course. We saw the prices already, what's happening with it. How will this dent or increase the cost of all of these things that were set? So you have a certain idea of what an electric vehicle will cost. You have a certain idea of what a windmill will cost if you didn't install one on your property. You have an idea of what solar panels are going to run you. Now take those prices up because everything else involved in the manufacture of that has gone up too. In addition to all your food price increases, fuel price increases, insurance rate increases, property tax increases. And this is the world we live in. Rundown for you: tin, lithium, cobalt, and you can see the renewables, how they're going to be used. I like the color breakage: renewables, robotics, oil and gas, energy storage, and salts. You know, another guy, I went to the supermarket. They had an expiration date on salt. An expiration date on salt. It's millions of years old from the Earth's crust, and there was still an expiration date on the salt. Just saying. Side tangent there. Anyway, China offloading a record amount of dollar assets at the same time. So not only do we have to print $1 trillion every 100 days to keep everything moving. We got the inflating everything, and now the rest of the world is in tandem starting to throw away these dollars. Will it come home instantly tomorrow? No. The writing's here on the wall. They unloaded 53 billion and obviously converted to gold. So how many more countries can throw away 1 billion, 2 billion before hundreds of countries turn into trillions that are swept away? Now, these issuances are a little bit different than creating money out of thin air for, say, a property mortgage or a development loan for commercial real estate. Once that's paid off, that goes down to zero anyway. So that was just created artificial money that came out of nowhere, and when it's paid back off, it goes and shrinks back to zero, even. This is something different. This is a whole different animal here. So where does it take us? The word on the street is get out of the dollar without crushing your own economy. It's going to continue indefinitely from this point. And wait until Saudi Arabia announces within the next 3 months or less that they are formally joining Brics, and they will take payment for anything. For their oil, any currency will be valid. At that point, that signals the end of the Petrodollar, and the run will be on to exit treasuries because they're not going to be backed by anything except empty promises and threats of military intervention. So speaking of that, the EU now is coming on, and there's a frontal assault on the Brics nations here. Anything and everything is being thrown to stop the formation of this trading bloc. Remember, it encompasses, at the bare minimum of just what's already in the Brics, 40% of global commerce and 42% of natural resources across the planet, energy, etc. So India is now being targeted by the EU for this new quote-unquote deforestation regulation, where anything that is produced that is responsible for forest degradation or destruction, deforestation, will not be allowed to be imported into the EU. Okay. Brazil, India, and China are the top 3 to be affected. Oh wait, aren't those the Brics nations? So it's a major trade embargo against the Brics nations from the EU directly using the site of deforestation. They're not directly saying, EU, we're going to stop everything because you're bad Brics people. They're using a side regulation to do so. This could, EU is guilty of deforestation itself. So can it not import? So what happens to another nation that deforests inside the EU? Is it not going to be able to trade and swap within the bloc then because it deforested and it created a product from deforestation? What happens to the wood chips and pellets that are sold all across Europe? I traveled there, especially Croatia. They have these wood-burning stoves, but they use pellets to keep the heat rolling. Okay, well, some trees had to be cut down for that. So what? They're not going to be able to import Croatian items because there was some tree cutting, and this is a product made from a tree that was cut, deforestation, quote unquote. So they're going to be banning an enormous amount of products coming from India, Russia, and Brazil, and China also. Well, they've already cut everything off from Russia, so that's a no-brainer. You can't tell me that all those 4 nations are targeted just by random happenstance just because of a deforestation law. No, that was planned. But you see how it is being pushed, anything and everything to stop this formation. I remember hearing some interviews back in the 80s when they were talking about if China and Russia ever come together, that will be the end of what we consider the modern world order. Because that trading bloc alone will usurp everything. They can go off and do their own whatever without sanctions, trading currencies outside the dollar. This was talked about in the 80s, and it is happening now. And they are doing anything aside from war on a larger scale in a global conflict to stop this formation. Here we go. A 10-year contract. New Delhi signed with Tehran Monday to develop and operate Iranian ports in Chabahar. So nations are not even allowed to have cooperation agreements with other nations. Now the U.S. is threatening sanctions with India just because they decided to help build a port. Because here where this is going. Enough is enough across the world stage here. And now there's enough force and willpower and economic might behind it to tell everybody else to take a leap. This is the same types of things that's driving everybody over into the Brics aligned nations. Do you think the U.S. by threatening this is helping anybody? They're just showing it is what it is. It's bare for all to see now. If you don't agree, we will. Before it was not. People were saying it was on the edge of it. They changed out the leadership in Iraq. They changed out the leadership or tried to in Syria. They changed out the leadership in Libya, Egypt. It was borderline on the edge of is it real or is it not, but here it's starkly in your face that whatever was talked about is validated now. Emperor has no clothes. It's just going to drive more nations. For example, Mauritania saying, hey, we would like your help and we would like your cooperation, economic as well as military. Please come into our country and help us, Russia. We'll do a food exchange with you. If you help us cross-swap different products in your nation, we'll also get food and materials at the same time to swap between. So they just drove Mauritania and ECOWAS and most of Western Africa into Russia and Chinese hands. The U.S. has with their threats. And you can see this threatening, all it does is make, okay, I have a second choice. Well, we're going to go over here. I don't know if it's on purpose to try to cause a faster downfall, to reset the system faster. I really have a lot of doubts now if anything is organic any longer on what we see in the geopolitical stage. And all of a sudden we have this complete school of fish shifting in one direction for a new economic system and the big shark behind it kind of herding the fish, for a better term, into almost something purposeful to cause the separation, the split, and the non-wanting of U.S. cooperation. And then the firewalling off into these Western nations. It seems like it's on purpose for me. A little bit more than it's organic. Could be a bit of both, I guess. But on the Côte d'Ivoire, African nation. Okay, so you have a farm and you think that whatever you grow on the farm you could sell, and if you, whatever price you can fetch for that, you can fetch it. Apparently not there. Now cocoa prices have risen to all-time record highs, obviously. So the growers and the co-ops are like, wait a minute, if we hold on to this, and we know that the harvest was even less this year, if we hold on to this, let these beans cure a little bit longer, we can sell them for a much higher price. So we're going to stockpile this. We're not going to sell it out onto the world market. We're not going to fulfill contracts with this. We are going to hold on and wait for even higher prices because next year it's going to get way higher because they had less yield coming out even this year. That was the plan for the farmers. We're going to get rich finally. We're going to finally make some money out of our land here. The Coffee and Cocoa Council forced the government to force the farmers to sell their beans. So much for free anything, right? We were forced to react vigorously and suspend around 40 cooperatives and buyers to put an end to this practice, which is destabilizing the domestic marketing system and putting some exporters in difficulty, i.e. the banks who had to facilitate those contracts for physical delivery that couldn't, and they didn't want cash settlement. Translating that from business English into something you understand. Destabilizing domestic marketing systems mean you interfered with the corporations and the banks. The little farmers disrupted that banking and corporate system inside the country. They had to be dealt with. So what they did is basically said, firewalled off. Zero for you. You can't sell anything now. You wanted to hold it on for later? Zero. You can't sell it into the market, and you were forbidden from selling anything. Which for me, delivery into that market for those contracts, I would think they would try to go black market and sell it elsewhere and then push that back into the market through a secondary nation myself. Could they get the same price that they were waiting for on the world market? I don't think so. Spot price, we'll see how it goes, but your food is not your food to sell as you wish. It's not yours to barter, to trade as you think you might be able to. It's now controlled by government. You're telling me governments come into control and tell farmers what to do. What happens when when egg prices come up and you go, I bet I can get $13, $15 for this dozen eggs, and the government can say, no, $4 is all you can get. We're going to come in and confiscate everything. And if you try to sell it, you'll be under arrest for trying to sell everything. And we're going to forbid you from using central bank digital currencies to transact these eggs especially when it goes that direction. You can see the dangers of CBDC in this. Cocoa prices here, record highs. Now the Ghana Cocoa Board, which is in bed with the Cocoa and Coffee Council, is talking about delaying 150,000 to 250,000 tons of cocoa because A, they couldn't get it because those wholesalers were holding on to it, or wait until the next growing season, which is a pipe dream, because this year's yield was less than last year's yield. So cocoa is in a golden driver's seat for those who produce it. Those farmers should be making millions and millions of dollars off their cocoa. They should have vast land holdings, building new homes, infrastructure, irrigation, and here they are forced to still live in straw huts because, well, you're disrupting the corporations in the banking derivatives contracts on the deliveries for the physical. So the derivatives are also another part of that cocoa. Anything that's on a market with a spot price, obviously the derivatives going against that. So you're disrupting that as well. And you've interfered too much with the banks, so you're the little farmer that have your tiny little piece of land. We're going to come in with the army and then we're going to confiscate. And that's kind of where it sits right now, just for cocoa. Now, can you imagine when it's a real crop that has real world implications of like hundreds of millions of people starving to death? Can you imagine what governments will do with grains? They're going to put army around in the grain storage facilities. There's going to be armed guards in front of the supermarkets. Mike and I talked about this last year. You're going to have your digital rationing card. You're going to be on a central bank digital currency. If it's going this way for cocoa and they're going to try to grab that much control of cocoa because it hurt the banks, what's going to happen when 100 million people don't have food? The farmer is going to be at the behest of the end of the barrel telling them what to do or what price to sell for.